The fight for 15 Democrats in Congress and on the campaign trail are pushing for a higher minimum wage. But one Seattle restaurant chain says higher minimum wage in its city contributed to its bankruptcy. Dan Springer has the latest from Seattle. Dan?
With Congress close to voting on a measure that would raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, a cautionary tale from Seattle, where big employers are currently having to pay at least $16 an hour. Restaurants Unlimited, which owns 35 restaurants, mostly on the West Coast, and 7 of them here in Seattle, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy last week, and in its declaration cited high wages as one of the factors. Over the last 3 years, the company's profitability has been significantly impacted by progressive wage laws along the Pacific Coast. The result was to increase the company's annual wage expenses by an aggregate of $10.6 million. Some examples given: Portland, San Francisco, and Seattle, where over the last 3 years, workers' pay has climbed 35%, 41%, and 69% respectively.
I think it's just the cost of doing business has gone up, and it's really hard to adjust your prices in a restaurant at the speed that the market changes.
Nearly every Democrat running for president in 2020 supports raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, and the bill to do that will be voted on the House floor on Thursday. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office just released its report on more than doubling the federal wage floor. It said 17 million workers would get a pay raise and 1.3 million people would be lifted out of poverty. But on the downside, close to 3 times that many could lose their jobs as companies get more efficient. An advocate for $15 in Seattle says that's way too pessimistic based on what she's seen locally and with Restaurants Unlimited.
There's been 111 restaurant openings in Seattle, so clearly people see that this is a great market for opening a restaurant, and I think that there was something else going on.
29 states currently have laws on the books which pay a higher federal minimum wage than the $7.25 that it's been at since 2009. Back to you.
Thanks, Dan. So, Christina, should Democrats take stories like these and take a step back when it comes to minimum wage?
I think that they're going to argue in general, no, this is an opportunity. We need equality. So many people can't afford anything in this country, and therefore we need to raise the minimum wage a little bit higher. In the case for Seattle, we've seen it jump quite a bit over the last few years in terms of their minimum wage. So I do understand from this business perspective the chain closing. However, from the flip side, as a business owner, don't you always want to be well prepared and be able to handle these types of situations and not just use that as the one excuse as to why you're folding and why you're going under? So, yes, I don't think Democrats would stop at all, to answer your question. They would just further reinforce them, further fuel them. Americans need this money.
Good point.
But they should take a second look, because when the Congressional Budget Office looked at what would happen if you raise the federal minimum wage to $15 nationwide, which, by the way, right away is a non-starter, because the federal minimum wage should not be the same in Alabama, where the cost of living is about half of what it is in San Francisco, as it is in San Francisco. But nonetheless, what they found is that it would throw 1,300,000 people out of work, and yes, raise the same number out of poverty. But let's think of the impact on those two groups. If you lose your job, that is an incredible step back in terms of your life and your moving forward. It is not the same as, having some adjustment in your income. I think the outcomes are totally disparate and much harsher on the downside than the benefits that would result from raising the minimum wage. I think it's a terrible idea. I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And the people most impacted are teens and people
small
moms.
Business owners, Liz. I mean, you cannot forget that small business is the backbone of this country. We have 30.2 million small businesses in this country, 6 million that have employees. And guess what? Nobody guarantees their wages, and they are risking their time and their money and their effort. It is absolutely ridiculous. The government shouldn't be involved in this.
And what about looking at different ways? Instead of just a federal minimum wage, why not let the states, first of all, handle the wage needs of different standards of living? What about the earned income tax? That's what Warren Buffett said was probably the best idea, so you don't distort the market and disincentivize hiring, but people that need more money, they get some money back from the government.
I think that's exactly right, Susan. It should be state by state. And by the way, there's some really awful aspects of this bill that's going to be passed in the House, such as removing the exemption from teens. It's really important for teenagers to be able to work at whatever level of pay they can earn just to get a foot, just to get experience. Yeah. If you make it $15 an hour for a kid that really doesn't contribute much, you're not going to hire many teenagers. And you're like what's happened in France, you'll see youth unemployment go through the roof.